All right, all right. What up, Breathe family? This is Davis. Welcome back to another Breathe Pulse. We've got Gabriel Halpern back for another talk. Today we're talking about life after loss. Lots of folks experiencing grief before, during, and after this pandemic and just in life in general. So feels to me like a very relevant talk, and I was super excited when Gabriel posted the idea. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can put your comments and questions down below, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. That's what makes this fun, is when people are interacting and joining in. On the Breathe side, not a whole lot going on, but a lot of communication and loving, and it's been good to see people getting back to seeing each other in person safely, however that may be. And tonight we'll go for about an hour. Love to see it. Welcome back to another Breathe Pulse. Bringing you in now, Mr. Gabriel Halpern.
All right. Thank you so much, Davis, for setting us up again.
You're welcome. I'll be right over here, just on that edge of the screen, whenever you need me.
Call if I have any trouble, right? Okay.
Okay, much love.
Thank you. Great to see you people out there, even though I'm not seeing you, but metaphorically, thanks a lot for spending some time with me. So first off, as I always like to say, I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are. Don't forget to turn the switch on. Let's begin with a little music, a little poetry, and then we'll get into the meat of our talking tonight. Gene Clark, former Bird from the old Birds group, and went on by himself. Created a huge, funny song called Full Circle. Funny how the circle turns around. First you're up, then you're down again. Though the circle takes what it may give, each time around it makes it live again. Funny how the circle is a wheel, and it can steal someone who is a friend. Funny how the circle takes you flying, and if it's right, it brings you back again. Funny how the circle turns around. You think you're lost, but then you're found again. Though you always look for what you know, each time around there's something new again. Funny how the circle is a wheel, and it can steal someone who is a friend. Funny how the circle takes you flying, and if it's right, it brings it back again. So we'll just end it there with two verses, since I'm not here specifically as a singer, but I just like to get some rhythm going and keep music in our life for sure. I also like to remind everybody that poetry, literature, metaphor, fairy tale, mythology, they all have something in common, and that is they use language that has to be penetrated. You can't just understand it with your left brain. It appeals to both hemispheres. And especially when we talk about things that have symbolic import or psychological import, we're not always looking for a one-to-one correspondence in the world outside of ourselves, like a news report. Like if they say a brand new lion cub has been born in the zoo, you don't have to believe them. You could go to the zoo and go to the big cat cage and find out for yourself. But when we're talking about metaphysics or speculative philosophy, in other words, the shared dream that isn't in this world, but it's in the imaginal world, which doesn't make it any less real, then learning how to break through the code of how these things are written or spoken helps you understand, I would like to think, a deeper significance. So to that end, here's a little poem by Jalaluddin Rumi, one of my favorite mystic poets, called These Spiritual Window Shoppers. These spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? I'm just looking. They handle 100 items and then put them down. Shadows with no capital. What is spent is love, and 2 eyes wet with weeping. But these pass into a shop, and their whole lives suddenly are before them in a moment. Where did you go? Nowhere. Well, what'd you eat? Nothing much. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something just to be part of the exchanging flow. Start a huge, foolish project like Noah. It makes absolutely no difference what people think about you. My poetry teacher said, always say it twice. These spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? Oh, I'm just looking. They handle 100 items and put them down. Shadows without capital. What is spent is love, and 2 eyes wet with weeping. But these walk into a shop and their whole lives pass suddenly in front of them, in that moment, in that shop. Where did you go? Nowhere. What did you have to eat? Nothing much. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something just to be a part of the exchanging flow. Start a huge, foolish project like Noah. It makes absolutely no difference what people think about you. So, as I'm talking about this topic today, life after loss and picking up the pieces to find focus and meaning, I first want to turn myself in as leader of me, I tell on myself. No matter what kind of optimistic, without naivete, picture I'm trying to paint in my Dharma talk tonight, let's get clear. I lost people in the pandemic, really close friend, and one of my wife's favorite aunts, with the thing that you hope will never happen, taking a relative to the hospital, and then you can't go in with them, and then never seeing them again. So I do understand loss directly, no degrees of separation, and I also broke my hip, fell off a bike the day before Easter. So I've had another kind of loss in my life that I've had to readjust to and learn to pick up the pieces and focus again and add that to how do I find meaning in life. So if you saw the copy that I wrote for this, I'm sorry to say that currently our collective dream is still about a toxic planet with political and economic systems that don't work and a serious communication gap or breach between ourselves and many other people in our own country, each one in their own confirmation bubble, and no one knowing how to find common ground to break through that. And of course, it's not only in our country, there's a global quality to this. Can't we dream something better? Aren't we capable of using our imagination to have the shared dream of making it good for everybody so that everybody finds their own way to do as much good to as many people for as long as they can? So, although tonight I'm not specifically going to talk about what one can do with grief and bereavement over whatever it is you've lost and the disruption that the changes we've had to go through in the last year has forced upon everybody, I'm really more interested in understanding how do we come back with intention, which is called sankalpa in yoga, and recapture purpose, which is svadharma, the individual path of optimal unfolding. And if we're going to be responsible human beings, which not only means responsible to yourself, learn how to follow your gut, your heart, but also to give back to the collective, the dialectic between the individual and the collective, or the personal and the social. You can't really separate the two. They kind of bleed into one another. Where does one begin and the other one end? Hard to say. But if you're going to ask that question, how do I get back to my focus and meaning? I'm not apologizing for taking this stance. Yoga has an answer. And I'm not saying there aren't other answers, and they're good ones too, but I'm not here to talk about those answers. I'm here to talk about the one that makes the most sense to me, because that's where I can share from the most authentic experiences I've had in my life. And I do understand that in terms of epistemology, how do you know anything? How can you make sure you're not bullshitting yourself? How can you be certain? There's always a possibility that you're not certain. I love this one idea that when Copernicus told people, the earth isn't the center of the universe, the sun is, that wasn't greeted warmly or quickly by his contemporaries. But you have to understand, the language that I'm trying to use is what I call disruptive language. It's supposed to get in there and kind of provoke you. I'm a provocateur. Make you feel uncomfortable in a certain way and put you up against the wall to see, are you walking your talk or not? These practices are essential to cultivate the qualities that embody the kind of developmental maturity that's necessary to be a person of focus, one-pointedness, concentrate on what you want to achieve, and then also to find meaning. How does this make me feel about purpose in my life? Because if you find this in yourself, there will be a kind of coherence, a kind of sense of integration of everything, a sense of significance. You realize that you're involved in creating value by sticking to what you know is right for you. And then also you find your purpose, and that's what gives meaning to life. But you have to understand, we're always susceptible to self-deception and doubt. Before Copernicus said this about the earth not being the center and the sun, it was an optical shared delusion. Everybody recognized the sun seems to come up in what we think is the east. It traverses through the sky and it goes down in the west. Not only can any individual look at that and say, yeah, I see that, but we can agree with each other. Don't you see it too? Let's stand here together. Our senses perceive the exact same thing. But of course, the sun isn't going up and down. We're totally wrong in our perceptions, although we've convinced each other. Isn't that the same thing we see? Isn't that right? Don't we know that? And yet, of course, we're completely wrong, because it's the earth turning on its axis that makes what appears to be sun going up and sun going down. So that's an example of things that we see that we think are taken for granted and even corroborated, confirmed by other people, still doesn't mean necessarily that it was true. All right, so yoga answers these questions. How do I find focus and meaning? Really simply, but it's a tough truth. So if I gobsmack you on the side of your head, get it. Develop your character. Develop your character. That's different than, do I have a job that pays my monthly nut? Am I stocking things away from my 401k? Where can I travel? All legitimate questions has nothing to do with developing your character. There are many people who have plenty of money in their 401ks, can travel wherever they want. They're living very well, but they're neither happy nor they're really contributing something that's helping along for everybody. It's because they don't develop their character. So I want to talk a little bit first about the yogic way of developing the character and see how I can get you into some sense of urgency. Because yoga is going to offer to you, if you choose, there's agency here, you have to choose. I used to say in some of my other talks, no bottle jumps off the shelf, uncorks itself, pours into a glass, and forces it down your throat. No weed jumps out of the ground, rolls itself into a doobie, lights itself up, and forces you to smoke it. There's agency, there's will, there's choice, self-responsibility. You have to make it happen by choosing to put your energy into it. And that's, of course, where practice is. So if there's no sense of urgency, if you're not on fire for this, as it says in the biblical code, if you're lukewarm, I spew you out of my mouth. The spirit wants burning, wants you to be on fire for this stuff. And so these are tools to help you with what I would call radical transformation. Not just same old, but to shift your whole perspective of what's going on in life and what you think life is all about and what role you play. So the first thing I want you to understand is tonight my disruptive language is much more about explaining. If you're in my yoga class, my language is much more about training. So one thing is kind of giving you the conceptual overview that maybe intellectually a light can go on and go, oh, I see that from a new way, a new angle. Maybe some of the reasoning will poke holes in the false reasoning that each one of us may hold when it comes to different areas of our life, philosophy. But the language of training is much more about boots to the ground. What do I actually do? How do I do it? And this is why I also say having a teacher or a mentor is very, very important at some stage. Getting feedback from somebody else. So you have some objectivity, that somebody outside of you can feed back to you something that you can't see or you don't know. You're unconscious of it. So when you practice yoga, one of the things you're trying to do is to get into what we call the flow state. You want to be in a relationship with your discipline, to your discipline, where there's fluency, right? A certain kind of ease, a certain kind of naturalness. Effortless being is another way that sometimes people describe what the state of yoga is. Everything is clicking, and you're not even trying hard. But of course, hard work went into it prior to getting to that state. Like when you see a dancer on the stage and they seem to be so free in their movements. Well, those movements didn't happen the moment they started dancing. They probably did some rigorous self-discipline, repeating moves over and over again to the point of repletion, to where it becomes second nature. And then they don't have to pay attention so much to the mechanics, because once you master the form, you're free to go beyond the form. So you play within the rules, and then once you master the rules, you let go of the rules. Yeah. But that doesn't happen easily, and it doesn't come cheaply. You have to put in your time. And of course, it's what you put in the time that's important, not just how much. It has to be quality time. But that means you have to learn to be intimately involved with whatever your discipline is. You have to learn to have renewed interest. Because if you're going to do anything, not just for a week, not just for a month, not just for a year, but maybe even for decades, how do you not let the monotony of repeating things again and again make you stale, dumb you down, make you dull? So renewed interest, learning how to refocus again and bring to your attention, and remember, your attention is a magic wand. Whatever you put your attention on is solid gold. It makes it grow and blossom. Whatever you withdraw your attention from causes that same thing to wither and die on the vine. So, what do you put your attention into? Now again, I can't tell you what you should put your attention, because remember, should shits, and nobody wants to be should upon. So these are more like suggestions. And although these come from the yoga mindset, which means in certain ways Eastern philosophy, I always like to find the contemporary embodiments that make you realize you don't have to do yoga or study Eastern philosophy to understand how this is in our own tradition. In fact, it's in every tradition if you learn to read it right, and if you understand symbols and how to break the code down, you'll recognize it everywhere. So what you put your attention to causes things to stand out. They become salient, right? Much more observable. And of course, a lot of things distract our attention and move our attention away from what our svadharma, or personal path of optimum unfolding, is, and we get sidetracked. You know, like when you're driving on the highway and I got it 400 miles, and all of a sudden there's a sign that says scenic overlook, or historic marker, or bathrooms up ahead, right? So whatever it is that a cat catches your attention, you turn off and you go look at the beautiful side, or you learn something about the history, or you go to the restroom, but then you don't stay there. You know that you got to get back on the on-ramp and then back on the highway. So part of the practice is recognizing how do you get diverted, deflected, diluted, or distracted. And in the Yoga Sutras, they talk about 9 different distractions that are happening, not because you're bad, not because you're wrong, not because you're at fault, but because this is what happens to consciousness that isn't trained to know how to focus in a one-pointed way your attention. And mindfulness right now, there's so many neuroscience corroborations for this, that socially cognitive stuff is all over with that word mindfulness, how important it is to know what you're doing with your attention and to watch what happens if your attention gets distracted to something else. And usually when it does happen, you're not even aware that you got distracted. You're lost in identification with it. You forget. Instead of remembering what you're all about, you completely lose it. Hence, the idea of the practice to learn how to bring yourself back again and again to the focus point, which could be your breath or whatever it is. Think about being on the slack line, How do you keep your balance? Well, you can't be thinking of other things. You got to pay attention to what you actually are doing and find peace there. So, what yoga is telling you is, first off, and this is, remember, all about developing your character. If you're a student of Ashtanga Yoga, as taught by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras, the first 2 limbs of the 8-fold path that they give you, not to be confused with the 8-fold path of the Buddha's teaching, very, very similar, but remember, Buddha was like the Protestant Reformation of Hinduism, so a lot of his teachings reflect many things that are similar to the path as taught by the Hindu religion and the kind of variations of the yogic path within that. The first things that they tell you are to understand the yamas and the niyamas. And the yamas literally mean death, and the niyama literally means not death. So I think what they're trying to tell you is when you hang out in certain states of consciousness, it's like death to your consciousness. It shuts you down. And also it creates what we would say negative karma. Because every thought that you have, every word you speak, and every action you do are propelled by your intention. And once you understand the karma, the cause and effect relationship between how you think, what you say, and what you do, and then how things turn out, and I always like to repeat this metaphor for the people who are or not gardeners, you get it. No one ever plants a tomato seed and then is shocked when cauliflower comes up, because it never happens. Never, ever. Read my lips. Never, ever, ever. No way. It's a law. It doesn't matter if you're east and west of the date line, north or south of the equator. This is a law which is unvarying. It's true in every single case. So now I digress for a moment, and that is, if you want to discover how your mind slips away, how your mind gets distracted, how your mind goes on automatic, how you are caught by certain habits, then you don't have a clue into what I call parasitic thinking. Well, we know that a parasite is some kind of leech or bug that burrows into the host and sucks the host dry of its nutrients or its blood or whatever, but it adds nothing to the host. It's not a symbiotic relationship. It's not a matter of, well, I do this for you, you do this for me, right? No. In parasitic thinking, it's only one way. So what I mean by parasitic thinking is negative thinking, naysaying thinking, complaining thinking, right? Always talking about what's wrong in the world, and what's wrong is always available. So if you want to let your attention get grabbed by the salient aspects of what's wrong in the world, the kind of thoughts you have, the kind of words you choose, and the kind of actions that will come from that will be caught up in what I call NMA, negative mental attitude, instead of PMA, positive mental attitude. Now, let me digress for a second. It was in the 80s where they already discovered scientifically what they call PNI, psychoneuronal immunology, that somehow your thoughts are directly connected to your nervous system, and your nervous system is directly connected to your immune system. And where they thought before that the immune cells, the receptors in the immune cells were only in certain parts of the body, they found out with better technology, no, every cell has an immune receptor in it. And if every cell is affected by your nervous system, because anytime there's any motor movement, the brain has to send some signal that gets carried to the muscles and break it down. When you keep going from the muscles to it, the cells that make up the very fibers and form of the muscles. And then if you find that your thoughts are communicated through your nervous system to the immunoreceptor cells, well then, most of us understand this intuitively, even if we don't follow it completely. But you can say things to yourself that make you ill. But the opposite is also true. You can say things to yourself that promote healing and make you well. And as I said, right now, as a collective, we're still thinking of the toxic planet and divisiveness as being more important in our dream than the shared dream of a Garden of Eden and a planet where everybody respects each other and takes the best of the different cultures and makes it all part of the human legacy. So, they first tell you to check yourself in terms of your ethics. What kind of moral human being are you? Not just in how you actually think or what your philosophy of life is, but how you treat other human beings. So the 5 yamas, which remember means death, if you hang out in these states, you cut yourself off from the life force. And then you're like a lost soul. They say, right, non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, non-addiction, non-greediness, non-miserliness. Said in a positive way, be peaceful, be truthful, be honest, be moderate in the use of everything, and be generous. So just think for a moment, however difficult it might be in any given situation to be this way, and especially if you meet people who rub you the wrong way, and so there's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction because you lose your attention and you don't realize what's happening, and then you're gripped in a reaction instead of a response. I understand that's hard, but it's harder on you when you don't do this. You suffer more if you're not peaceful. You suffer more if you're not truthful. You suffer more if you're deceitful and conning people. You suffer more if you're an addict. You suffer more if you're hoarding things to yourself. And of course, the opposite is true. You plant different kinds of seeds of karma where the fruit of being peaceful and truthful and honest and moderate and generous is auspicious circumstances. Life responds back to you as if it's conspiracy designed for your benefit, not to do you in. And then you attract toward yourself. Remember, the law of attraction states that which is like unto itself is drawn. So auspicious circumstances get created by your following this path. And remember, they're not just saying this as a suggestion that you'd be better if you're doing this. I think that the masters are trying to tell you, if you experience these altered states of consciousness, these higher states of consciousness, where immediately you recognize there's a greater sense of coherence, brain synchrony coherence, right? I already sense I'm more integrated with everything in my life. I see the value, there's significance to how I do this and how my daily life turns out, and it hooks me up to my purpose. I'm living my dharma, and so I feel there's meaning in life. This is all how you develop your character. And that's just at the level of morality, being a virtuous person. And this is not something that's necessarily taught in school. It's sometimes relegated to the religious sphere, or it sometimes is relegated to the therapeutic model, where you talk about your past relationships and how you may have messed things up, or maybe you've been shamed by other people, and so you don't have the skill set to know how to appropriately handle this. But in my mind, it's not like you get these things down and then you go on about your way blithely, whistling down the road. No. There's always an ongoing demand, a burden upon you, you could say, to be moral at different stages of your life, and you'll have different challenges that will push you or tempt you or pull on you to give up your principles. That's a really interesting thing to see, how much you're going to stick with it when the going gets rough. So this leads me to another sideline about developing your character, and that is the importance of your emotional nature. Now, although some kind of transcendence, right? If you practice yoga long enough, you will not just worship some deity, you will self-transcend into a state of consciousness that has no split, no dualism, no fragmentation, no existential estrangement connected to it, because you've hooked up to the unity. Yoga means union, right? It's both the path that leads you to the union and the state of union when you're there. In that state, everything is fine. But when you come back from that state, the depth of your revelation is going to be a guide to how you act in your daily life. And since every moment of consciousness, according to the Buddha, is a moment of feeling, it's really important. It behooves you all to understand, what am I feeling? But it's not enough to just understand what you're feeling. Can you articulate? Can you adequately access and appropriately express what you're feeling? And this is a hard thing to do, because I'll remind you that when I speak to my friends in education, whether it's kindergarten all the way through college and postgraduate work, and I remind you, I spent 25 years in the university, so I got my finger on the pulse of this. When you ask teachers, so you practice math just one day a week? No, every day we do math. And English composition, just Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? No, we make them read every day. And what about foreign language, just once every other week? No, every day we do that. But what about recess? Do they play? Oh no, we let them out and they play every day. And how often do you teach them how to recognize what they're feeling and articulate in speech what they're feeling? Well, we never do that. Exactly. So you have people growing up, and remember, just in case, and I'm sorry if this was true for you, you got shamed when you were younger, that people shut you down when you tried to express your emotions, whether it was joy or anger or fear or sadness or hurt or whatever it was, exuberance. A lot of kids are too much for their parents, so they have to clamp down on them. And then maybe you internalize the feeling, something's wrong with me. I'm at fault. I'm bad. And what's worse, I'm not lovable because of this. And then you think I have no power, no clout. And you make other decisions which aren't too smart for yourself. They don't serve you. So this is an important part of learning this game. But what I've learned from the masters is, it's not, you're always going to be working on these ethics. But the idea is not so much, I'm doing these things so that in the future I'll arrive somewhere. I don't like that idea of what I call postponement. It's always sometime in the future. It's not yet now. What I think the masters are saying is, if you practice yoga and have a deep experience, you will be in a state of consciousness where, from effortless being, you naturally will not want to be violent to anybody. You naturally won't want to lie to anybody. You naturally won't want to rip off anybody. You naturally won't be an addict, or in the strict sense, you won't misuse your sexuality and get in trouble by looking for love in the wrong places. And you naturally will be generous with the things you have. You won't be hoarding more than you actually need. So in other words, those things flow from the state of consciousness effortlessly, rather than, if I practice these things, I will arrive at that state of consciousness. See, I think that's ass backwards. But nonetheless, if you just do a little of this, just a little practice will alleviate a lot of existential anxiety through your insight, through your recognizing how much better your life is now that you're doing that. And of course, that's the whole idea behind this, is to have transformation, to move into a completely different perspective of how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see your interaction with other people. And that will give you what I would call an optimal grip on reality. And of course, even though I said it's always good to have a teacher to check yourself at the door to make sure you're not really bullshitting yourself, Because how do you know what certainty is? But somehow, if you read enough of the autobiographical writings of people who claim to have this state, or people who you know who have had experiences of altered states of consciousness, and maybe you've done it yourself, I hope you have, you'll realize that most people perceive the altered state as being more real. That's why they want to get back to it. That's why they want to expand it. Like we say, we hope that the altered state will become a permanent trait. And one of the things that you're looking for as you develop yourself here is that you have to both learn how to open your consciousness up, expand it, and then zero in. So that's called the gestalt, that anything that you see in the foreground only exists because it pops out of you. It's a salient thing that grabs your attention compared to the background. So for instance, you see me, I'm writ large, but the background is, the wall and the light switch and the tonka and so forth. So your ability to recognize the simultaneity, both things are happening at the same time, but one is more in the front and one is more in the back. And one of the things that happens in expanded consciousness or transformed consciousness is the stuff that was in the background, which is actually the glue that connects us all, that becomes foreground. And the stuff that was in the front that seems to differentiate us and separate us from one another and other things goes into the background. And that is closer to the true perception of how everything is interconnected, interlinked, hitched to everything else. Impossible to pull one thing out and isolate it from the rest of its surroundings. To be means to be related. Even if you talked about a human being, at some point you say, well, a human being has to be standing or sitting on some ground or chair or whatever. There's something else. You can't talk about the human being without the other thing that it's connected to. So that brings you into what I would call a dialectic understanding, trying to see from at least two sides, polarities, and many more sides. And that brings us back to what I said at the beginning, to balance the individual needs, your own svadharma, with the collective needs. Because we all have pulls put upon us by society, obligations. And I like to say that I don't know if anyone can ever really be free from desire, fear, and social obligation. But you can learn how not to be compelled by it. You know you're going to deal with it, but you don't have to be compelled by it. So your choices won't come out of guilt or shame. They'll come out of clarity. Now, the main thing I'm really getting towards here is that yoga is a heuristic discipline. So that's just a fancy way of saying it's a participatory experience. You can't be on the sidelines watching this. You're not the scientist studying some objective data outside of you. You are the scientist observing, and you are the data being observed. And this is where meditation is going to take you later on. So when you practice yoga, as you know, you start to do these ethical disciplines, right? You work on being a virtuous person, morally straight with every person you can be, projecting as much peace, truth, honesty, moderation, and generosity as you can to as many people as you can, insofar as it's up to you, because sometimes you're in environments or people who shut it down and make you feel fear and make you pull back, and you just can't give in that moment the best that you're capable of, the wisest one, the sanest one, the funniest one, the clearest one. It happens, part of our humanity. And also, each one of us has shadow elements within us. Even though there's a huge fund of human decency in every single person, each one of us has places that have been bent out of shape by society's pliers. Right? Traumatic experiences, old wounds that we haven't healed yet. And so that leads me to this next thing. Psychologically, I always say there are two wings to the healing bird. The first wing is the wing of playfulness. And yoga is serious play, but it is a kind of game. To be out there having fun, grooving, surfing through it all, not carrying it around like it's a load. Really important. Look up the book Homo Ludens, Ludens. Man or Humans the Player by Jan Hudenzinger. It talks about all ritual and ceremonial processes, which in the old days were spiritually influenced, or I should say spirituality influenced those choices. But now we live in a secular world where the kind of games and sports we play seem to be disconnected from that which is divine, but they still serve the same kind of purpose. Now, as easy it is to say, well, just get out there and have fun, but if you're hurting or you're depressed or you're anxious, you don't feel like just getting out there and having fun, dancing, making jokes. It just doesn't. That's because the wound hasn't been dealt with. And if you have an old wound where you didn't learn the skills that were necessary at that time to deal with it appropriately, if you've stuffed it, or you denied it, or you minimized its effect on you, then the chances are you still don't have the skill set to deal with it. And so that's a gaping hole in an integrated personality. You can't have the coherence, significance, and purpose I'm talking about unless you make some effort. And again, depending on how big a deal it is you have to face, how big a burden you're really carrying around with you, that will determine how much you have to work on this. Because if you can't make people safe, if you can't be safe, if you can't find a way to not feel threatened, you're not going to come out and play. No matter how much I invite you, no matter how much I create a safe environment in my own mind, if you don't feel safe, I ain't going out. I'm not showing you that part of myself. So remember, that's two sides of the work that we have to do. Find the thing you love, the thing that where your passion gets ignited. You know my phrase, have you found the dream whose pursuit is self-energizing for an entire life? That's it. If you find that, 24/7 ain't enough. Having clones of yourself ain't enough. You wake up every day and I'm all over this. This is what my business is. This is what I get up to do. So that's the playful part. So find out what gives you pleasure, what gives you joy, and go deeper into it. That's what gives you the strength to then say, let me look at this other part of myself and see what I can bring to it to help heal it. Now, this connects to the yoga practices. The next thing they tell you, as you're working on your ethical self, right, do some postures. And of course, if you're a yoga practitioner, you're doing the asanas. But the joy of movement is the really important thing here. I never tell people stop surfing, biking, rock climbing, doing martial arts, slacklining, whatever you do, keep moving. Because each one of those sports or disciplines has its own kind of form. And each one of those forms, you can do the same thing I mentioned before. You can see the broader picture and you can see the detail, the small feature within the broader picture. You see the foreground and the background. You get the whole gestalt. The whole thing fits together. But they say that doing the postures are not enough. That's just the musculoskeletal, the outer sheath. They also say that once you get the ability to sit still, and once you've learned to open up your chest so that your cardiovascular or cardiopulmonary area is much more available to you, then there's a whole separate series of practices called pranayama, that basically means controlling the life force through the breath. And for those of you who followed me over the pandemic, I put out almost 300 breathing videos to remind everybody, this is a respiratory-borne illness. Come on, get your breathing together. And also to gobsmack the yoga teachers out there who've been practicing asana for years but still not doing a pranayama practice, get with the program. It's the next stage. That does something to your nervous system, to your mental focus, to your ability to slowly pull away from being dominated by what's external to you. Yoga doesn't make you a recluse. Let's get this clear. Yes, there are aspects of yoga that seem to be what we would call the ascetic renunciate philosophy when taken to the max. So it does teach you how to disengage. And sometimes it's really important to pull back from the social net, right? But yoga is also about engagement. It's not just world denying, it's world affirming. So you need breath to power you. You can easily understand that aspects of inhale give you energy and vitality, and aspects of exhale give you tranquility and calmness. So you combine them both, and you have what they call Hatha Yoga, the lunar and solar effects going together. You have plenty of energy, yet at the same time, you're not running around like a chicken without its head. One part of your breath makes you receptive to see what do I need to do, and then one part of your breath actualizes or brings up the energy, fuels you, and motivates you to do it. But even the breath control, according to yoga, is just another step on the way. It's a means to another end. And that is, you get very, very relaxed when you slow your breath down, because the ayama part of pranayama is to slow down the amount of breaths that you have. And we could go into the esotericism, the mystical physiology of you're allotted a certain number of breaths according to the Indian tradition. And so you don't want to use them up too quickly. And so you slow them down by the way you practice pranayama. And that gets you into such a relaxed state that you get into the next stage, and this is all developing your character, even though these practices are either done mostly by yourself and sometimes in a class, but the fruit of these practices is what you take into the world, where you bring the coherence, the significance, and the purpose into your daily life by how you contribute your gifts. So the next stage is what's called pratyahara, which is the withdrawal of the dominance of the external world over you. And now you're putting more time into what we would call your internal world, your private world, what I call your imaginal world, or your psychological world. And remember, this is the world where you're not looking to people outside to punch your ticket. The yogic warrior seeks impeccability in their own eyes, not social verification in the eyes of other people. No one can ruin your self-esteem. Understand that? Stop blaming anybody else for where you are. No one lowers your self-esteem, because the word is self-esteem. It's not other esteem. When you practice these things, you develop a much better sense of self-esteem because of your commitment to doing what you said you were going to do. I'm going to work on my moral, virtuous being. I'm going to practice poses. I'm going to work on the breath. I'm going to learn to relax. And again, gobsmack you over the side of the head. You can't take 5 minutes out of your day. You're so busy from the moment you wake up to the moment before that 5 minutes, you can't just lie down in shavasana and take the edge off. Shows you how little commitment a person might have if they can't find 5 minutes. And of course, the more you can rationalize how you don't have time to do that in your life, that's like an admission of how bad you really need to do it. Nonetheless, once you learn to relax, which means you're able to watch what happens in your mind, in your consciousness, in a clear field of comprehension. It's like you're lying on your back and you're looking up at the blue sky and it's completely empty. If a bird flies by, it's almost impossible not to realize or see that bird as it entered and exited the sky. Or if a cloud floats by, you see it, here it comes, it's coming, oh, here it is, here, oh, there it goes. It's impossible not to notice that because of the stark emptiness, the qualitylessness, the attributelessness of the sky itself. All the things happen in the sky, but none of the things that are happening are the sky itself. Whether it's weather patterns or jets or pollution or whatever, that's not the sky, that's just in the sky. So the next 3 stages of yoga have to do with deepening stages of meditation. The first of which is focus. Keep bringing your mind back to whatever the point of awareness is that you're using to orbit your attention around, whether it's your breath or candle flame or a mantra or a mandala. It doesn't matter. They all serve the same purpose, which is to bring your mind to one thing, single focus, not letting it get distracted. And if you notice that you're distracted, bring it back to focus again and again until it does not move. And when it does not move, you've moved from concentration, called dharana, to jhana, meditation, an unbroken flow of attention with no interruptions. So the first one is likened to a candle flame in a windless place. If you've ever watched the candle flame, you know if there's any air moving, it flickers. But when there's no air moving, it stays steady. If you kept that steadiness going, so there was no flickering at all, the image they give is like two vessels that you're pouring oil from one to the other. At one point, there's that unbroken flow. It constantly goes like a waterfall, continuously being fed from the amount that's there. No stopping. No stopping. And then if you could keep that going, according to yoga, you would get into what they call samyama, which is the fusion of the person who is the meditator, that which they're meditating upon, and the state of meditation. When they fuse into one, you end up into that samadhi state. And in that samadhi state, you get the revelation. And I can't tell you what that revelation is. It will be different for each person. Although yoga seems to point you to, if you do it and follow their steps, you're going to get to the same place, which they call self-realization. And here I have to just remind you with what I call disruptive language. Self-realization doesn't mean you know more about your personality, you know more about your inner workings, because there's an aspect of one's ego which is not just one's viewpoint and isn't just the, what I like to call the narcissistic grandiosity of how everybody would like to strut their stuff in a healthy way and be admired for it. No. This is the part of ego that has no actual existence of its own. But yet it makes you believe not only does it have existence, it's the most important thing in your life, and it's so rock solid, it kind of keeps you trapped in its view of you. So for instance, so many people who practice yoga know that yoga says you have to find out what the egoless state is all about. But as you're practicing, you're constantly checking yourself. What does it say in the books? Am I experiencing what they said in the books? How far along am I now? Am I doing better now than I did last week or last month? That's neurotic preoccupation with the very self that you're supposed to give up or destroy, or at least don't identify with it. Because you can't get rid of your viewpoint, but you don't have to identify with the content of the different thoughts. One of my Buddhist meditation teachers said, haven't you ever noticed that ego always needs a self-reference? It has nothing to stand on by itself, so it always refers to something other than itself to try to create the solid meaning. What's your name? Gabriel. No, that's not who you are. That's a name that was given to you. Well, what kind of occupation do you have? I'm a yoga teacher. No, that's just a profession you worked in. Keep on going. Every question you ask, you're going to answer something that has nothing to do with you. So you have to see through those self-references and end up in this empty state, egoless state, selfless state. They call that self-realization. But up until that point, we're all working probably more a little bit on the ego that we're normally thinking about. Who am I? What's my history? What's my biography? Where did I come from? Where do I want to go to? Right? So if we're going to truly wake up, open up, grow up, clean up, show up, if we're going to have a perspective that's based on a participatory, I got to be in it, hands-on, not hands-off, transformative change, like a makeover. Look at everything in life differently than I was conditioned to look at it. And be free from post-traumatic stress disorder. You can come out of this with post-traumatic stress growth. If you take this play with yourself seriously, the cognitive possibilities of getting into this flow state and being fluent in it, so you're in a higher state of consciousness that feels right. But I just want to remind you that if you choose to be actively involved in being as good a human being as you can be, and then making mistakes and finding out I can do better than that, right? Knowledge of bad karma is discovering something that you know you can do better than. I want to remind you that there's still a burden that comes with revelation. And I like to share this one insight from the Bible as a reminder. Supposedly the Jewish people, when they were liberated from Exodus in Egypt, the whole nation heard the voice of God when the Ten Commandments were given at Sinai. No other tradition claims that the whole nation heard this at the same time. Almost all the other spiritual psychotechnologies were developed by one individual who then their followers codified it and came after them. You would think that after going through all those supposed miracles and having God being the cloud during the day and the fire at night, taking you through, guiding you, protecting you, that you'd listen to anything that was said to you when the Spirit is directly revealing to you. But the burden of morality is such that you still have to work on yourself. Because 6 weeks later, they were worshiping the golden calf. So don't think that just because you get high, you expand your consciousness, you have a revelation that that's done. You still have to work on yourself. And there are plenty of psychotechnologies available to us, whether they're from medicine plants, whether they're from therapy sessions, whether they're yoga classes or martial arts. These are all participatory, transformative experiences, what I call heuristic experiences. You don't have to believe anybody else's statements. You substantiate the claim for yourself. And then hopefully you have a teacher you can bounce it off of, and you know how legitimate or certain you can be, because it confers the sense of this is more real than the day-to-day life I was living before. And the fancy way of talking about it is inactive analogies. Things that you do that activate certain things that make a relationship between you and the discipline. And then things open up for you. And you let go of parasitic thinking. And instead, you become a positive human being. And by that, I mean an optimistic human being without naivete. Because if you are optimistic but with naivete, then you will still be battling the forces of malevolence that are in the world, and you won't be up to the task. But if you're an optimistic human being without naivete and your eyes are open, you are woke, and you see the nightmare of history, you see the catastrophe of existence, you see the existential anxiety that so many people have who don't know how to transform themselves, then I smack you in the face with my gauntlet and I throw it down and I ask you to take it up. Because my star is waning and your star is waxing. 50 years ago, I got the message from the elders, and that was the future is in your hands. My life and history is there for all to see what I've done. And I'm here until the Spirit takes my last breath away to help as many other people, whether they're in yoga or not, and especially the generations coming after me, which is you. The future is in your hands. So develop your character and contribute your gifts to the world, and then you will understand what it means to pick up the pieces after whatever loss you've had and to find focus, meaning, and purpose in your life once again. So that's what I have to say right now. And if anybody wants to come in with a little private chat and say something, I'd love to hear from you. I don't know, I forgot, Dallas, whether or not people can actually say something on the mic or they can only say something with written form.
Just written words. Anyone
Okay.
listening, if you want to ask a question, you can just type it in the comment section and we'll get it up on screen here.
Exactly.
It looks like we have some shy audience members this evening.
Shy. They're very shy. I don't bite.
I did write down one question, if you don't mind.
Good, please, do it.
You talked very briefly about attention, and where we focus our attention flourishes, and where we don't withers.
Yeah.
I very much excel in being able to focus on one thing and do that thing very, very well.
Okay.
Not so much the other things that are in the peripherals. And so that works out really well when that one thing serves me. It doesn't work quite as well when that thing doesn't. And just in general, there's times in life that I wish I had a wider view on things, at least like for my like personal scope and bandwidth and what I'm paying attention to. And so I don't know if I can stop there and you're kind of getting my gist, or if you want me to keep going.
Yeah. So you're talking about how do I develop this kind of mastery across disciplines and not just in the field that's the one that I really connect to? Well, there's a number of ways of dealing with this. Obviously, you have to learn to bring attention to what I call the throwaway actions, right? Because your consciousness, your awareness, your aliveness, right? It's there as a constant presence, The moment you open your eyes till the moment you fall asleep and you're not aware. You don't have to turn it on. It's there. But you may not be conscious that it's there. And your ego has preferences, things it doesn't really want to do, doesn't prefer to do that. Right? I don't want to have to take out the garbage. I don't want to have to fill up clean up the dog poop. I don't want to have to balance my checkbook. Right, I understand that. But it has to be done unless you're so stinking rich that you can have other people do everything for you, right? But then you have a hands-off existence. So how do you learn to do that? Well, obviously, one of the ideas behind yoga or any of these disciplines is to develop a certain continuity of awareness. And so let's say you're practicing yoga. You think every pose comes easy to you when you practice yoga? No, you realize, oh, I'm good in the standing poses, but when it comes to back bending, oh, standing on my head, oh, not good. Twisting, oh yeah, I can do a good twist and bind my... But so by exposing yourself to different modalities that force you to look at how you figure something out that's not in your wheelhouse, you take that lesson off the mat. Because what you learn on the mat is what you take, like I said, the fruit of your practice is what you bring into the world. And of course, you don't do everything well, but then you discover something about your mentality. Look how I don't pay as much attention to poses I don't do well. Look at how I don't practice those poses in between classes, so they never improve. Look at how I'm down on myself. Look at my little mental mantra. You can't do this. You started too old. You have a glitch in your knee. Don't do that. And so, of course, you disempower yourself. But if you made the effort to apply yourself with sustained attention, knowing very well that at the beginning you'll space out, you'll drift off. Right? I mean, every one of us has learned in school to face the teacher, give the answer, but your mind is 1,000 miles away. You can con people that way. But when you're practicing yoga, you're only conning yourself. You know when you're really with it, and you know when you're not. So part of it is holding yourself accountable to, why do I not bring the same amount of attention, even though I realize I know your ego prefers certain things to other things? Get over that. If you want to have a continuity of consciousness, you have to keep it in a certain way on an even keel without trying to deny that you have preferences, and that's called non-attachment. Then you start bringing that same awareness into the things that you say, well, I'm not so good in the peripheral things. Well, why not? Probably don't pay attention to them. Or parasitic thinking. You've given negative value to that, and so forth. You don't find there's any worth. Why would I spend time getting into this stuff when I think it's bogus to begin with? But that would be in any discipline. It wouldn't be yoga. Practice martial arts. You think you can do all the katas immediately and know how to do the right kind of falling without hurting yourself? You got to do it over and over again. That's why it's a practice. And once you do that, you start to get a lot of confidence. Gee, I can drop from my headstand into a back bend. I didn't kill myself. Wow. Now I have more guts. Not just to do more challenging poses, but now I have more guts to say to my boss, I want a raise. Or to say to my girlfriend, this relationship is over. Or to say to somebody, I love you, man. I don't know what, each person has a different level of courage that they have to step into. But the way I'm spinning it is, your practice exposes you to a wide variety of different ways of having to deal with your skills. And if you understand some of the skills, open you up. Some of the skills teach you to zero in and focus. And you take that off the mat, and little by little, you see aspects of your life. They change. So that's what I would say about that.
I love that. I've always thought of slacklining as like an incubator, right? It's like a very safe space to fail and to not be good and to be scared, and then to take those lessons into real life. And so,
right. But again, if you're scared and you're failing, right, you have to go back on the line to do it again, right?
Sure, exactly.
And so through familiarity, you to some extent conquer or even master the skills to do now what previously you couldn't do.
Yeah, totally.
So that's the life lesson.
It's very easy to focus on things that you're passionate about. It's very hard to focus on things that in a given moment you don't see the value in, or you're thinking parasitically, like you said, for sure.
Yeah.
So
But once you find a thing that you love, you expand it. You have to find the universal aspect of it. And people who are on fire, who have passion for something, it's not that they don't have other things in their life that they're not as. Of course they do, but the passion so overwhelms all those other states of consciousness that somehow it can incorporate, and help you go beyond that. So just start and keep going. I mean, that's really the essence of yoga is begin and continue. That's it. Begin and continue.
For sure.
And it starts falling into place.
We have a couple of nice sentiments, no questions, but a couple of thank yous from Amy K and Mikey Natterjack.
Hi, say hello to Rachel for me, Michael.
I'm sure she's listening.
Yeah, so, great.
Hey, Rachel.
All right, so let me, if there's nobody else, let me give one more little.
Yes, the floor is yours.
Do you make these recordings available for the people to tune in over the next couple of days?
For the next...
Whatever. Okay,
forever.
Great. So let me just put a little more shameless marketing out there. If you put
Please do.
Gabriel, the Meister, with my email, I invite people to contact me that way. Thank you. That's my... No, it's the Meister.
I don't have your email. What is it? Spell it for the people.
Yeah, TheMeiste@yahoo.com. Yeah, Gabriel Halpern will go to my website, Gabriel Halpern YouTube channel, but this is the one to get directly to my email. I'd love to hear from any of you and carry on the conversation. I have a couple of wonderful things coming up. Next week, I'm doing a third class in the series for Good Vibrations Yoga called Love, Serve, and Remember. It's on Wednesday the 16th from 11 to 1. Contact me if you're interested. And then on the 17th of June, I'm doing a fundraiser for a group called Yoga Cares, a group of my students that started a non-for-profit organization to train yoga teachers to go into marginalized areas and have teachers who are on the same ethnicity, having teachers from their own community coming in and teaching yoga rather than having people from outside who maybe may not understand English as a second language or whatever is the difference that makes them feel, I can't go to the normal yoga center, which is predominantly white privilege. You know what I'm saying? So yep. Great organization to do a fundraiser for them. So contact me there or go to my Facebook page. You'll see stuff like that and help out if you choose to. And all of those are ones where if you can't make it at the time, you can make a donation and then you can get the recording sent to you afterward. So at least you can see what went down, both Dharma-wise and asana-wise.
Excellent.
Right,
How cool of a feeling is it that you've taught these folks yoga and dharmas and stuff like that, and now they're bringing value. It's like the second gen of your value. Is that
not only second gen? Again, I've been doing this 50 years. I've already had a third generation person be a yoga teacher whose mom was a yoga teacher who was my student. That's how you know you're really doing it a long time. And like the children of your former students are now yoga teachers. It's mind-boggling. It really is. But again, I'm putting it out there to you people. The future is in your hands. I'm around for however long I'm going to be around for to help and share and critique in the most positive way I can and honor you and bless you for your skills and hopefully give you enough courage to go into the shadow work that you got to do so you can be free from any kind of past wound to the extent that a human being can. And then you can play and bring your gift to everybody else. So as long as I'm around, I'm going to do that, do as much good as I can to as many people as I can for as long as I can. But the future is in your hands. So use your own smart intuition to help the planet. And if I can be of service to you in any way that way, don't hesitate to call me. Dallas, again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'll probably contact you sometime in the summer and come up with some other idea that I hope will be another transition to, this is what we're facing right now. Thanks for sharing that. And we'll go from there.
I love it. Thank you. It's a pleasure to host you.
All right. Thank you so much, my friend.
Okay. Take it easy.
Be safe.
All right, y'all. That was this week's Breathe Pulse. Another banger from Gabriel. I love having him on. It's such a good time. Here's his website one more time. The guy has a newsletter that you can sign up for on that website that has brought me a lot of value. Also, his YouTube At one point, he was posting videos daily. I don't know if he still is, but there's a lot of videos up there. So check that out. Follow Breathe on all socials. If you haven't purchased a Breathe slackline, do so now. I don't want to give away too much, but what's left of jelly is all there is. And then yeah, so check out Discover Breathe for the slackline kit, or you can get it on Balance Community. That's gonna be it for me. Don't rush it, just crush it. Have a good weekend. You know who you are. Take it easy.